How's it going, everybody? Hope everyone is doing well. My name is Jason, and in today's video, I'm going to be doing a video that I promised I would do a couple of weeks back when I did a video on my favorite, most exciting players in the CFL, and most of those players featured on offense or special teams as kick returners. So in this video, I'm going to be presenting my favorite defensive player for each CFL team in 2023. Pretty self-explanatory, so let's get started. So starting from east and working our way west, we have the Montreal Alouettes, and Montreal has a lot of interesting defensive players to choose from. They have been a generally very good defense this year in all three levels, but my pick has to be defensive back slash safety Marc-Antoine Dequoy, who I think has become one of the most dynamic defensive backs in all of the CFL, maybe the best Canadian defensive back in the CFL this season. Over the last couple of years, he's really, emerged into that role in the safety position for the Montreal Alouettes. And I mean, this is a guy that has tremendous range and athleticism back there. I remember when he was coming out for the CFL draft, he kind of fell in the draft process because he was getting a lot of NFL interest from a team like the Green Bay Packers, I do believe he signed with, and eventually was cut during training camp. But he worked his way back to the CFL and eventually, found his way back to Montreal, where he played at U Sports for the Montreal Caravan, and I think he's played incredibly well ever since for the Alouettes at that safety position, and just a really exciting player to watch. Gets his hands a lot in passing lanes, has a lot of interceptions over the past couple of years. Just a really fun player to watch for the Alouettes. Now, my pick for the Ottawa Redblacks is pretty easy, and people that have watched my previews this year, I've mentioned him a couple times on the previews for the Redblacks, and that is defensive back Brandon Dandridge, who I think, is a very interesting player because he also doubles as a return man, but specifically on the defensive side, I think he's made a lot of game-changing plays this year for the Redblacks, and I'm really excited to see what he does going forward in his CFL career. I think he's arguably a CFL All-Star this year, and that's impressive considering, the surrounding talent around him in that secondary. But I think he's had a really strong season for the Redblacks this year. Had that pick six in that game against Winnipeg where they were able to come back from 16 points and win that game. So I thought that was really impressive, and I think that Brandon Dandridge is my favorite defensive player to watch on the Ottawa Redblacks this season. Now, my pick for my favorite defensive player on the Toronto Argonauts, I think it's pretty hard because there are a lot of guys that are in that conversation. A guy like Hanoch Mwamba, who unfortunately hasn't played a lot this year. Really like Jordan Williams, who has taken his spot in the middle linebacking spot. But I think ultimately my pick here is going to be defensive tackle Sean Oakman, who has an incredible story in how he got to the CFL, once heralded as, a top prospect for the NFL draft. He unfortunately had some legal issues that, clouded over his NFL future and ultimately never really got a shot down there. Years later, he comes to the CFL. In the last 3 years, he's been a baller up here. I believe a couple of times he's been named to the CFL All-Star team, if not the Divisional All-Star team, and I think he has a chance to do that again this year with a great Toronto defense, and I think he's been, a dynamic player for them, a really tall player, gets his hands up and knocks passes down at the line of scrimmage pretty often, can rush the quarterback, just a really, strong contributor for that Argos defense, and my favorite player to watch for them on the defensive side of the ball. Now, my favorite pick for the Hamilton Tiger Cats, this is probably the hardest one because this is my favorite team in the CFL. People that watch my channel know this. My pick for this one is going to be defensive back Stavros Katsatonis, who I think has really stepped onto the scene and broke out this year. I think he's, gotten to the lineup the last couple of years, and he has started some games for the Ticats, including, I think, the Grey Cup a couple of years ago. But I think he's really come into his own this year as perhaps the best defensive back on this team this year. And I think he's just been, a very exciting player. I think he's made, a key play every week for the Ticats, something that swings momentum in a game. He had that great interception against Saskatchewan. He's kind of in that free safety mold where he can really take over with his instincts, just has incredible ball skills, and I think that he's been an incredible addition to the Ticats defense in the starting lineup, that is, this season, especially considering Tunde Adeleke, their other star Canadian defensive back, has missed a lot of time and has been underwhelming since, he's been in the lineup this year. So I think at the end of the day, I think Stavros Katsatonis has to be my pick for the Hamilton Tiger Cats. Now, in terms of my pick for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, This one is pretty easy for me because he's been my favorite player to watch for them for years. I mean, I like other guys like Adam Big Hill and, other guys on that defense, but I think ultimately I got to go with Willie Jefferson, who I think is the most unique defensive player in the CFL, just with the, wingspan that he has, just the rare athleticism and movement skills that he has in the defensive end position. He causes a lot of matchup nightmares for opposing defenses or offensive lines, that is. And I think that, he's been a very dynamic player throughout his CFL career, but particularly over his run in Winnipeg. And I think that what stands out the most about him is his ability to knock passes down at the line of scrimmage. I haven't checked, but a few weeks ago, I believe he was leading the league in pass deflections, which is usually a stat that is led by defensive backs, but Willie's always near the top of that list because he's so effective at getting his hands in passing lanes. And I think those plays can almost be just as effective as sacks, even though you don't get the lost yardage on top of that. But I think at the end of the day, Willie has always been one of my most favorite players to watch in all the CFL offense or defense, so he has to be my pick for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. Now, my pick for the Saskatchewan Roughriders is a guy that's really reestablished himself the past couple of years as one of the better linebackers in the CFL, and that is Larry Dean, who previously played for the Hamilton Tiger Cats, Edmonton Elks, but he's really reestablished himself in Saskatchewan after having a horrible Achilles injury in 2021. Last year in 2022, he was able to come back and was able to reestablish himself as a very effective linebacker, and has continued to do the same this year in Saskatchewan on an otherwise very poor Riders defense. So I think at the end of the day, Larry Dean has to be my pick for the Saskatchewan Roughriders. Doesn't hurt that he used to play for the Hamilton Tiger Cats, like I said, and he was always one of my favorite players when he played here. Now, in terms of my pick for the Edmonton Elks, this one is relatively easy for me because he's been, again, one of my favorite players in the CFL for a long time now, and that is defensive back Luchez Purifoy, who I think has just been a jack of all trades back there in the back eight of the secondary. I think he's been incredibly effective since coming over to Edmonton this year, and I think that he's been the guy that's made some key plays at times for the Elks defense where they really needed it. I think he's had a couple of pick sixes this year, just game-changing plays, and I think that his ability to play different spots in the secondary has been very valuable in an otherwise very inexperienced unit that they have there in Edmonton. So Luchez Purifoy, always one of my favorite players in the CFL once again this season, and he has to be my pick for the Edmonton Elks. Now, in terms of my pick for the Calgary Stampeders, there's a couple of different candidates here, but ultimately I'm going with defensive tackle Mike Rose. And usually I wouldn't pick a defensive tackle to be the most exciting or my favorite player to watch on a defense, but Mike Rose is a very special player, and I do still consider him the best defensive tackle in the CFL despite Calgary's struggles this season. I think he's been one of the more consistent players on that team this year, consistently generating pressure from the inside, can even move outside at times to rush the passer. So I think Mike Rose has been one of those guys that shows consistent effort, consistent motor, also contributes on special teams, or at least he has in years past. I think he's been a guy that's been an incredible contributor for the Calgary Stampeders over the years, and in this season, I think he's been very effective as well, and I think he had a big sack against Saskatchewan this past week, which helped them win that game. So I think at the end of the day, Mike Rose has to be my pick for the Calgary Stampeders, though there are guys like Cameron Judge, who I also really enjoy watching as well. Now arriving at the end of our list with my favorite player for the BC Lions on the defensive side of the ball, and that is defensive back TJ Lee, who has been one of my favorite players again since entering the CFL. I think that he was one of the first CFL players to actually follow my Twitter account, so I always have some special value from that. But I think on top of that, he's been one of the best players for the BC Lions again this season. I think he's been with the team for 10 years now. Just a really special defensive back there. Always a guy that's never afraid to tackle as a defensive back. I think that is one key aspect of his game, that he's never been afraid to play physical, and I think that's helped him survive in the league for longer. And I think he's also been tasked with covering a lot of the hardest assignments on the offensive side of the ball. So I think at the end of the day, TJ Lee has been my favorite player on the BC Lions for a long time now. He is still my favorite defensive player on the BC Lions in 2023. But with that said, that is going to be the end of today's video, ladies and gentlemen, and I want to thank each and every one of you for watching. Once again, my name is Jason. If you want to support the channel, as always, be sure to hit like and subscribe, and let me know your favorite defensive players on your favorite CFL team down in the comment section. And with that said, I'll see you guys next time. Peace.